What's up? It's your boy, Hex Boy. Welcome to the dungeon. They put me here because I'm a very naughty boy. Anyways, I thought I'd make this video because as I scroll through social media doom scrolling like a crazy person, I noticed that like people make a lot of like videos and like tips for beginners, and like a lot of the tips are really bad. Do you know what I mean? Like promote like really bad habits you shouldn't do. So yeah, I'm just gonna like react to some of those. Now I feel like it's like in 30 seconds or 60 seconds, however long, it's kind of hard to go over all the nuances, and that's why I think some of them are so bad. If any of you disagree with what I'm saying, that's perfectly fine. Just don't get butthurt, okay? All right, so this is the first video. Really quick before we get into it, I just want to say I'm not trying to throw shade at all.
Here's 3 FL Studio tips I know for a fact most producers don't know. With EQing a loop, most people will probably just use the default setting with a parametric EQ to kind of duck down the low end or the high end. Doing this will still leave frequencies in your mix that you don't want.
First thing, what do you mean by frequencies that you don't want? You know, because he's cutting like the bass and sub. And the thing is a lot of people say, oh, you need to cut these frequencies out. When you cut too much, it's thin. Like they say, oh, you need to avoid mud. But when you cut, you're doing the opposite of too much mud. Now there's not enough mud. And another thing too, if you're using realistic sounding instruments, there's frequencies down there from like touching the instrument and blowing and all these intricate things that happen that you subconsciously hear. If you cut all of those out, you like ruin the believability of the sound. It will go from sounding like a realistic sound to a synth sound because it's too perfect. Your ear can hear those things.
Instead, click on presets and choose one of these cut presets. This will get rid of all the frequencies on your cut.
And this is another thing too, I think is a little wonky because he shows you how to go into the presets and click a preset. You can set this up without using a preset. If you can, I think you can see my mouse. These bands here, you can actually click up and down and drag on these bands to change the steepness of the curve and the type of curve as well. So if you don't want to cut, you can also make like a bell curve or a band pass, things like that.
This will get rid of all the frequencies on your cut. To change the color of your...
And another thing right there, when you cut frequencies like this, you're going to mess the phase up of your sound very badly. If you're cutting lots of instruments in a very similar frequency like this, it's going to ruin your mix. Doing it on a couple instruments should probably be fine. I find when you cut really harsh like this on the low end as well, it ruins the phasing a lot. The reason why it's so bad is because the way EQ works to turn the frequencies up and down is actually using negative phase. Even though you're taking something away, it's actually adding frequencies to remove those frequencies. It's really hard to explain, but yeah. Because of this, you are constantly ruining the phase of your sound. I think there are actually settings in parametric EQ to change this, but it's going to use a lot more CPU and it still isn't really perfect. The next 2 tips in this video aren't really important to the whole point of this video, so we're just going to go to the next.
A mastering engineer when I was like 13. I called him and was like, how do I make my song loud? Which is such a thing you say when you're first figuring out how to learn how to produce music. He told me about like limiters. I didn't know what a limiter was. And then he said, listen, it's really important that you understand the delineation between the correct way to do something and whether you like it or not.
This is true. I could not have said that better myself. There is a baseline knowledge you need to understand of how the audio works and is being processed to be able to get what you want. But after you get there, it's really the only important thing is if you like the music or not.
Everyone in the music world is going to tell you why you did something incorrectly. You know, there's, oh, that's too loud, that's too this, that's too this. And he was like, it's really important to like something or not like it because your taste is what really matters. And
yes, the reason why your taste is what really matters is because if you're just trying to sound like everybody else, there's nothing unique about you. Nobody's gonna really want to fuck with you because you just sound like everybody else. And there's already people who sound like everybody else who are in the shit and have the contacts. So now you're competing. Like for example, if you wanted to make music like Drake, it's never going to work because why would somebody want to listen to you try to sound like Drake when they could just go listen to Drake? And no offense, you're trying to compete with somebody who you can't compete with at that point because you don't have a super expensive studio and a super expensive team behind you.
And it's also going to be your greatest defense. If somebody goes, oh, that vocal's too compressed. That's true if you don't like the way it sounds. That might be the reason. But if you go, no, I compressed it that way on purpose. I like it. Even if it was an accident, if you like how it sounds, then it's the correct way.
Yeah, and I think that this is also so important because if we followed everything by the rules, we wouldn't have got so many sick genres. You know, like hyperpop right now is all about breaking the rules. It's like calculatedly breaking the rules. I don't know how to describe it, but we're doing things that you're not supposed to do, but we find ways to make that work. And it's so important to do that, to find your own sound. You know, I think it's the reason why Look at Me by X blew up so hard too, right? He said, fuck it, I don't want to sound like everybody else. I'm gonna scream into the mic until it's clipping, and I'm gonna boost the bass up until it's merging in with my voice and everything's just so distorted, you know? And then it's like, whoa, this is some different shit. And it just fucking hits so hard because you've never heard anything like that before. Next one, please. Next one, please.
Once I have Patcher open, the first thing I do is add a parametric EQ2. I set this EQ band to cut out all frequencies under 25 Hertz. This is done because your mix literally does not need those frequencies. All they do is make your beat sound slightly more ass. The next
So you're gonna see this a lot of time. A lot of people don't understand what cutting this harshly does. It's like I said, if you're not doing it a bunch, it should be fine. But the sub is arguably one of the most important parts of music nowadays. So you need to be so careful. It's actually a lot better to cut, but a little bit more softly. Here, I guess I'll bust open FL and show you what I'm talking about. All right, so what I prefer to do when I'm cutting frequencies is instead of cutting it super hard like this, like they're saying to do, this is what really messes with the phase. I think it's actually best if you just loosen it up a little bit and you bring this up and you roll it off like this. If you have extremely low bass and you still want to cut, this might not be an option. It might not be an option and you're going to cut it harder. And like I said too, not like I said, like Finney said, if you like the way it sounds, that's all that matters. But I just think it's important to be aware of how what you're doing is affecting the song that you're making. Do you know what I'm trying to say? It's like if you're cooking, you could use any kind of oil you want, but you should know how that oil is going to affect the flavor of what you're making. Because if you're getting a flavor that you don't like and you don't know why, then you can't fix it. So it's really important. And this is another reason why I'm saying I'm not hating or throwing shade, because you can't fit that into a minute video. There's so much nuance, right?
The next VST in our chain is the Fruity Soft Clipper. I turned the threshold up to negative 2.5 dB and turned the post gain up to 90%.
So that's actually really funny to me because let me see what he's doing.
The threshold up to negative 2.5 dB and turned the post gain up to 90%.
So from what I can tell, the soft clipper didn't do anything but add a bit of volume, which you actually could have done in the EQ without ever opening that soft clipper. So when you're in the parametric EQ here, this right here is like a volume. So you can actually do gain staging with the EQ if you wanted to. So he could have literally just brought it up like this instead of opening the soft clipper to do it. It's just redundancy. But like if this is his process, that's fine, whatever.
Limiter. Once you link it, start playing your beat. Turn your ceiling all the way up, then start adjusting your gain. I usually mess with it until my master is peaking around -4.
Did he just use the soft clipper to boost gain and then boost the gain again in the limiter? Like it's pretty much doing nothing except turning up the volume. Like I said, in my opinion, you should have brought the threshold down to catch the peaks. That's what the soft clipper's for. That's what clipping is.
Beat. Turn your ceiling all the way up, then start adjusting your gain. I usually mess with it until my master is peaking around -4-ish dB. Next, bring down the ceiling so that it is just barely cutting off the highest peaks in the waveform. Then turn all the noise gate and envelope knobs down to 0. Now begin to slowly reduce your saturation knob. You are listening to hear when it starts to add a crunch to the overall sound of your beat. Just go a little bit past this point and stop.
So yeah, the Fruity limiter bit was actually a pretty good tip. Not a lot of people know how to use the saturation or use it at all, but I guess I think there's probably better ways you could do it. I'm not a huge fan of the Fruity limiter, but if that's what you got to work with, that's what you got to work with, and that's a really good way to use it on your master. So I also think his mastering chain was a bit lacking. Like really when you're going in for the master, you want to do a little bit more than compress it and bring up the volume, you know. I just noticed that he also is saturating after the cut, which is funny to me because the saturation probably just brought those frequencies back. Saturation doesn't just add harmonics upwards, it does downwards as well. So like he cut those frequencies out he said you didn't need, but then brought them back with the saturation. So usually the cutting you want to go almost last. That's another thing, in my opinion. You can do whatever you want, but like if you're using an EQ to cut out frequencies, don't just bring them right back after. I mean, like I feel like that's super obvious. And another thing too, master's really the glue. So personally for me, the philosophy I have behind it is locating frequencies that sound good with the EQ and boosting those, cutting ones that don't sound so good. I like to go in with the mid-side EQ to make sure I can cut as much low end as possible. I feel like most of the mud in your mix actually comes from the sides and not the mid signal. So I would usually take a lot of frequencies out with the mid-side EQ. I feel like that is super important for making certain parts of the beat pop in and out, you know. But that's just me.
Hey, Julie Schatz here with Splice. Here is part 2 of common beginner music producer mistakes. Not paying enough attention to the frequency spectrums in all parts of your drums. So for example, in a hi-hat, you might have some low end that you're not realizing is actually contributing to some muddiness in your mix. So just make sure to cut that out.
I don't know if you could notice this without good headphones on, but like as soon as she cut it out, there was like an emptiness to the hi-hat, which for more synthetic hi-hats like this, for like trap and stuff, it's not a big deal. It'll sound perfectly fine for the most part. But if you're working with a real hi-hat sample, those frequencies down there are being generated from them actually, like, it's not just the sound of the hi-hat, it's also the sound of the stick hitting the hi-hat. So with more synthetic samples, it's probably fine to do that. But that's another thing to keep in mind. If you're using real live sounds, cutting all of that frequency out ruins the realistic feel to it. I don't know if I'm explaining this well. Same with kick drums. If you hear realistic sounding kick drums, you hear the knock of the mallet, not just the bass drum itself. So with synthetic drums, it doesn't make a big difference, but just keep that in mind if you're using a real sounding, like a real live hi-hat.
Out and it's going to help. Mixing up gain and volume. Volume is really just air that's coming through your speakers or your headphones, and gain is actually the signal strength. As a basic example, if you compress a track, usually the signal is going to be lower, so you're going to want to raise the levels. If you apply the makeup gain, this is going to accomplish this, and that's very different from just raising the volume.
That's a good point. It's a little redundant because in a digital setting, it's pretty much functionally the same thing. But a good example of when that makes a lot of difference is if you are recording an instrument or recording with your microphone. Turning the gain up will help the signal of your instrument or your voice come up without also bringing the noise floor up. That's, I feel like, a more practical example they could have shared. Like, you hear my mic right now, I'll turn the gain down and then turn the volume up to compensate for that, and you should hear a lot more noise. Hello? I also have to get much closer and it's distorting now. You can hear how much difference that makes of just turning the volume up to make it louder instead of turning the actual gain up on my hardware. All right. I hope that I actually can't hear it, so I don't know if that even made a big difference, but hopefully you kind of understand what she's getting at.
Not bussing effects, especially common ones like reverb and delay. Not only is this going to save a lot of CPU because you may want those same effects on other tracks within the project, but also you're going to want to use this really the same reverb, the same delay throughout. Hope this was helpful. Make sure to subscribe. And
that's not true. I think this comes back to that second short we watched where he talked about how you like it and like if you like it or not. If you're putting the same reverb on every single instrument, it's going to sound more uniform, but you're also going to have a part where all the reverb frequencies are stacking together and it comes back to like phase issues. I feel like to like an instrument that's very in your face and close, in my opinion, having a shorter decay and also bringing the wet down a lot is gonna sound good. And then ones that you want to have farther back are very quiet. You want to bring up more decay, so it rings out a bit more. It sounds more echoey. That's how I look at it. It's really up to you what you want, but I think saying you want to use the same reverb and delay on everything is kind of like a fallacy that we keep telling people. You want to go in and make sure the reverb works well together, but just stacking the same reverb plugin on top of every single instrument is just going to muddy up everything, and there's going to be no definition in your reverb. It's just going to be a wall of echoed frequencies that don't contribute much to the song at all. Next one. Are y'all ready for the next one?
Hey music producers, here are some simple tips for better arrangements. You can add a lot of character to your melodies by just adding a simple filter effect. This works great in like say the intro or a bridge of a song. So I have a melody here as an intro. And this creates more of a dramatic effect when the beat drops. Using reverse sounds like a cymbal or a vocal are great ways to transition into a drop or different sections of your beat, but you can take that same concept and do like a delayed drop or use some of those sounds in different parts of your beat, not just for transitions. So I have a reverse cymbal here going into the hook, but then I have another one a little later, so you can hear how the beat really drops further into the hook.
Yes, sir.
I hope this was helpful. Like and subscribe for more.
I don't have much to say about that. I think really what she's getting down to, use the tools at your disposal, man. Use them. You know what I mean? Fuck, that beat is hard as fuck, honestly. Let's go to the next one.
Here's 3 FL Studio tips I use every day. To copy an automation clip, you need to open up the automations menu, click on this wrench icon and select copy state. After that, you can open up any automation clips menu and click on the wrench again and select
what the fuck? I didn't know about that. That is so clutch.
paste state. To convert audio into MIDI, open up an audio clip in Edison. Click on this wrench icon and select convert to score and dump to piano roll. This isn't always accurate, but with some tweaks you can get the exact MIDI from the audio. To copy a mixer's plugins, you need to right click on that mixer, go to file and then save mixer track state as. Click and drag that to the mixer you want to copy it to, then you should be good to go.
I don't know if you could see what he did there at the end, but that is a really important tip I think people should know about. This one actually wasn't in what I saved, but it just kind of came on randomly, but Soul State is super goated. If you want to learn about producing music, Soul State. He is the GOAT. He goes through live streams and videos of all of the biggest artists in the world, and he breaks down their thought process behind everything.
People talk about how singers cheat. Autotune is one of the ways. The other ways is through extensive vocal comping, where you sing the same section like 50 times in a row, and you cut out the best takes.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's been like an arms race with vocals and vocal production. You have your lead vocal, you have your doubles left and right, you have auto-tune, you have EQ, you have harmonies. There's so many things, even if you can't hear them, that fill out the vocal. To the untrained ear, it kind of just sounds like one vocal. It's like, don't try to make yourself remember. So I would encourage people who are recording their own vocals for the first time to not sweat the fact that their first result is going to sound like shit, because mine does too. I think mixing vocals and writing vocals is like a Bob Ross painting, where gradually the good result comes into focus. It doesn't snap into place until well into the process, and it doesn't snap into place when you make a big change usually. You really have to put a ton of effort into vocal chains.
Yes, I'm so glad he said that. If any of the clients that I work with end up seeing this video, can you please take that into consideration? I tell you when we send files back and forth to do this shit, okay? That was Porter Robinson. He's one of the biggest producers and vocalists ever. So if you think that I'm full of shit when I say it, listen to him. I swear to fucking God, because I can do a better job when you do that too. It's not just to make your music sound better. It's so that I can do a better job as well. And if you go and work with other producers, they're going to love the fuck out of you for that.
Hey guys, I'm back. I want to give you 5 tips for better beats. The first tip is to line your kicks up with your 808. So if you have trouble lining up your kicks to your bass, try just putting them on the same exact spots in your step sequencer. The next tip is to give your
What did he say?
hi-hats a little room, a little breathing room. Go to your wrench tool and then turn up what's called time shift or time offset if you're in FL Studio 11.
It's actually huge for your hi-hats. Just don't overdo that, but it sounds beautiful, especially for like a lower BPM with slower hi-hats.
Sounds so basic, but if you don't have the right sounds, you're not gonna make the beats that you hear on the radio. So you gotta get the right sounds. We have this for free in our Discord. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/Discord. This kit was provided by Toxin. It's called Kazon Drum Kit Volume 1 and Volume 2. So it's not necessarily a mistake, but we tend to produce with everything all the way up. So what you can do is highlight all your tracks and pull them down and turn your headphone volume up. Or you can go to your master track and put a Fruity Balance before a Fruity Soft Clipper and then turn up your volume so that you don't have to have everything so loud individually. This last tip is subtle, but you don't always need a kick drum in your mix. Sometimes all you need is a Spins 808 or like the Baby's 808 or the Jug.
It just cut off halfway through his sentence. I don't really know what to say about that one because I feel like he literally just didn't really say anything except for the hi-hats. The hi-hat tip is a good tip though.
Here's how to make a good melody. Start off by laying down some bass notes. I started off with a 1, 3, 6, 7 progression here. Turn that into some simple triads. If you don't know, I have a video all about chords, so it'll show you how to do that. Add some filler notes to add some bounce as well as some tension. For example, this note here is 1 semitone apart from this note and this note, so it adds some tension in the chords. I layered it with an instrument that had a bit more high end just to fill up those frequencies. I added a violin as a lead and it eventually just becomes more of an ambient layer. Then I added this pluck just for another melodic component.
Is it Riley or Willie Beats? This guy's blowing up recently.
I exported everything and I just pitched it up 300 cents. And here's
he's a genius. This guy's gonna produce. This guy's gonna be producing all of the fucking beats for everybody on the radio soon. I'm not kidding you. This guy is so goated. So yeah, personally, I don't think it matters where you start. Starting with root notes for more melodic songs can make it easier if you want a really good progression, but it's not really essential. And especially if you want, the whole point of the song is to be catchy from one top line. At that point, you can basically throw any chords under it you want that are in the scale, and it shouldn't really matter too much. Obviously, different chords are going to produce a different vibe and all that, but I think this next one is also by Really?
Here's how to make a good melody. Start out with some bass notes. Turn those into some strummed chords. Add a handful of filler notes.
Oh man, he's goated, bro. His melodies always go crazy.
Add a vocal.
Also, one thing I didn't say about the last video, I think the best thing, like if you follow his tips, the best part about that is, like I was saying, a lot of people don't fill out the frequencies, the full spectrum of their song. If you listen to what he's saying and do what he does, you're going to do that like pretty well.
Vocal chop. And here's the full thing.
I think that's Arcade, by the way. Yeah, it is. You can see in the pattern name. I'm pretty sure he said as well the contact pack he's using for the guitar. It's a contact player pack. I think it's called, I just checked the comments. He said it's from Electric Sunburst Deluxe. Yeah, I mean, need I say more? This guy makes amazing melodies. Really, this guy's going places.
Here's 3 808 tips every producer needs to know. To extend the notes of your 808, press Ctrl and A to select all, then Ctrl L to extend each note to the next one. To get your kick pattern identical to your 808, select your whole 808 pattern and copy it over to the kick. Select all notes of the kick and use Alt and K to get all the midis on one note. Use Alt and U to chop up a MIDI note for 808 rolls. To get a triplet roll, place your MIDI on the first note you want the roll to be at and copy it over 2 times.
Everything else so far in the video is perfect, spot on, actually amazing. You can just change the snap in FL Studio of the grid. You don't have to do what he's supposed to do.
The 3 notes and drag them closer to each other using this arrow. Just make sure each note is in its own pocket.
I don't really have much to add to that because honestly, I didn't even know, like, I should know these shortcuts. I've been using FL Studio for like, what, 9 years? No. Fuck, over 10 years. And another thing too that's actually really funny when you think about it, a lot of these shorts are just teaching you things that you would know if you just read the manual for FL. So just read the manual maybe, dude, if you have time.
So let's say you have some space in between the next vocal.
Instead you gave up on me 2 months in.
So it sounds a little bit empty here. So what we can do is literally take the last part of the vocal
2 months in.
And then just copy and paste it here. And then also in terms of processing, you can add a little alter boy, put the pitch up to 12, play with the format to taste. You can also add some drive and then reverb, some more distortion, delay, a phone EQ. And in this case, there was a lot of low end, so there's another EQ to get rid of that. And then you can also play around with the melody if you wanted to. So for example, you can even stretch this a little bit, and the end result, you can get something like this.
Yeah, that's a vibe. That's a vibe. What is there to say about that? He's just showing you a good creative idea. You should go try that. And remember, you don't have to do it the exact same way. Maybe you could not filter it as much, or maybe filter it so in a way where it's more of a high end or more of a low end, depending on what your song needs or has in it rather, you know? Experiment. Don't copy verbatim what these guys are doing. Find your own spin. Make a U-type beat. I know you can do it. Make a U-type beat, okay? You got me? You got me? Make a U-type beat, you fucking cutie. Oh, I just realized I have FL open still. Oops.
It's 2022. There's no excuses for out-of-tune 808s.
I just got so distracted, sorry. I'm kind of on 13 Tech's dick right now. Yo. I just hope nothing that says is like misconstrued as me trying to like belittle anybody, because I just want to add my voice to the conversation. My feed is filled with videos like these.
Start off by dragging in your 808. Click on it and right click on the waveform. Click edit in audio editor. And once Edison opens up, you can click on this region icon. Next, you need to click on detect pitch regions, and it should give you the note of your 808. If your 808 is in C like mine.
Why did I save so many 13 Tech videos? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take so much of your content, bro. I hope you don't mind.
And then you're good to go. If it's not, then you need to figure out how many notes the 808 needs to be pitched up or down. To do this, go back to the menu of your 808 and click on this wrench icon. Let's say, for example, your 808's in D sharp. You'll need to bump down the pitch of the 808 with 3 semitones. As soon as you figured out where C is on this piano, you can just right click on that note. And now your 808 should be tuned to C.
Wait a second.
For example, your 808's in D sharp. You'll need to bump down the pitch of the 808 with 3 semitones. As soon as you figured out where C is on this piano, you can just right click.
No, that's not how that works. That's not how that works, dude. You want to use that feature to set the root note. I'm busting out FL again one more time. Usually what you would want to do is change the root note. So if it was D, it's playing D, the root note should be D, you would right click D, and then you can see root note is set to D, or it was D sharp, wasn't it? Yeah, so right click D sharp. Yeah, whatever he did, am I fucking tripping? Because I'm pretty sure he
can just right click on that note. And now your 808.
No, he didn't. He tuned it to A. Yo, in the beginning of the video, you said there's no reason for out of tune 808s. And then you taught people how to tune it wrong. If you do it like this, then your 808's fucked. Right click the note that your 808 is playing.
It's 2022. There's no excuses for out-of-tune 808s.
Yeah, bro. You need to delete the short. You're spreading misinformation, bro. Like, that's not cool. I don't like you're fucking up the newbies, bro. You're literally, what the fuck? You gotta be better, bro. What the fuck? But yeah, that's just wrong, man. That's just incorrect.
This is the biggest vocal mixing mistakes beginners make in FL Studio 20. Your plugin order of your mixing chain plays a massive part in your mix. I know this because I made the same mistake all the time when I started mixing. Start off your chain with an auto tune of your choice. I use Waves real time, but you can read.
Nah. Don't start off your vocal chain with auto-tune. Sorry, I gotta say it. This is the one thing that I'm gonna be super firm about. Compress first. That's my opinion, and I'm gonna die by that. That's the one thing. I don't care what your stance is. It's about what you like most. No, not this time. The first thing you should do to your vocals in the vocal chain is compress it. It's that simple. And if you're not doing it, then you're just doing it wrong. That's the one thing. That's the one thing.
Really use any type of pitch correction. Next, I add a de-esser. This helps cutting out sharp frequencies from.
Don't put the de-esser second. Don't, because if you're doing things like EQing some high end back in or this or that, maybe you put some saturation on the vocals, the sibilance is going to come back. The thing you need to think about that a lot of producers miss, if you're doing any kind of effects or anything like that are removing frequencies or removing certain things, it should be coming pretty much last. There's differences, like reverb would come after, because if you're keeping the sibilance in, doing reverb, then cutting in the sibilance, then the reverb's going to have that sibilance, things like that. So, but for the most part, it's like you need to be aware. If you're trying to take something away, you're probably going to end up doing something later down the line that's just going to bring it back. So really keep that in mind. If you're going to be saturating or boosting the high ends in any ways, do it before you start cutting sibilance with a de-esser.
From the T and S sounds and vocals. You want to find a sweet spot where you can't hear those harsh frequencies but the vocals aren't muffled. Next, I like to add an analog EQ to cut out some lows and boost the highs. You don't always have to use an analog EQ, but it just gives the vocals a better sound. After that, I add a normal digital EQ. I like to use this EQ to do sweeping, which is basically boosting a narrow band over all the frequencies and ducking the ones that sound harsh. Next, I add some compression to the mix. I use CLA vocals to do this, but you can use a stock compressor as well. To finish the mix, I'll
CLA vocals is a scam.
I'll add my reverbs and delays and a bit of fresh air to boost some highs at the end.
Fresh Air is super clutch. It's my favorite plugin ever for vocals. Honestly, if you don't use Fresh Air, it's a cheat code.
End of the chain. Be sure to like and subscribe for more.
But right there, Fresh Air is exactly what I was thinking about when I was talking about cutting out sibilance. That high knob in Fresh Air is going to bring all your sibilance back. If you were using Fresh Air, de-esser needs to come after Fresh Air. And I only say this because the whole point of the de-esser, if you're putting a de-esser, you want to remove that sibilance. That's your goal, right? So if your goal is to use the de-esser to remove the sibilance, you're sabotaging your goal. When you use Fresh Air, you're bringing the sibilance back.
These are the plugins you must have in your mix, otherwise you're missing out. Distortion plugin. It saturates the sound, giving it more punch, and so it creates a very nice sound, making the mix sound harder. Solid state compressor. It's very useful to use on your kick, 808 or vocals because it's a very dynamic compressor. It can be heavy and invasive or gentle and dynamic. It depends by your taste. Mono or stereo EQ plugin. It's
important. I think what he was saying before doesn't really matter too much. This is huge, man. Really, really, really huge. The stereo quality of your song is so so important. It's just the most important part in my opinion. This is what makes your mix too loud or too quiet, or nice and wide or too narrow. It's something that's hard for beginners because most of the plugins that let you do this are pretty expensive. So as far as I'm concerned, there's no way to do mid-side EQ in FL Studio stock. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there is no way.
It's better than the alternatives because it allows you to play with mono and stereo frequencies alone and with the stereo width. This way you can look in detail which frequencies you want to emphasize or reduce. Tape emulation plugin. Put it on your master and I guarantee that the overall sound will change completely. That's because this plugin is meant to give analog pace and warmth to your mix. Oh, and it works great on pianos and synths.
Yeah, so those tape plugins are really good for instruments that are supposed to sound really realistic because like I said, there's like frequencies in these real sounds that you can't get digitally because it's just a byproduct of like recording in some way or another. I think some really good Kontakt presets keep a lot of those sounds in because it's all based off of recordings. But if you're using a synth piano, it's a good way to give it a more realistic vibe, or I guess realistic might not even be like the right word to use, but it helps a lot.
If you want your beats to slap, this is definitely the right choice since it's able to make your master go crazy without actually going in the clipping area. Follow for more tips.
Yeah.
So personally, I've really noticed that a lot of new musicians make this one mistake. When you're mixing your vocals, a lot of the time, the mixing track doesn't have to have all of this extra stuff. Now, if you do know what you're doing, of course, you can have a lot of stuff and it can add up. But most of the time, if you are a newer musician and you don't really know how to mix, all you really need is an...
I don't like where he's getting at because I understand. It's like my philosophy behind that is if you don't know what you're doing, then learn what you're doing. Don't not use something because you don't understand how to use it. Just learn how to use it, you know, because you want to do the best job you can. Don't limit yourself because you don't know how. Just go and figure out how it works.
EQ, a compressor, some auto-tune, and a de-esser. And all this together, you can really pull off your sound.
So I think that's probably about it. We're probably about done there. I just want to say again, the point was not to try to call anybody out. I just want to make it clear that it's so much more nuanced than this. You can't just go and watch one of these videos and live by that. You're gonna make shit music if you do it that way. And also you should probably just experiment and find out your own way of doing it because like we said before, it's all about your own personal taste. Make a U-type beat. I know it's fire. Anyways, if you like that, please comment, like, subscribe. Maybe they'll let me out of my dungeon and I can become a normal functioning member of society again. Okay, bye.